Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're cracking open a single powerful document, an open letter. It's from a journalist to one of the world's most prominent legal figures, and it contains an accusation so explosive it tries to rewrite the very first chapter of the Rwandan genocide. Let's get right into it.
So this is how the letter kicks off. It's written by a journalist named Ally Yusuf Mugenzi, and it's addressed to Louise, Arbour. Now the tone might sound polite, but the message underneath, it's anything but. This is a direct challenge, basically asking her to answer for what she did during a really controversial part of her career.
You know, this isn't some private email. It's a public demand for what the author calls historical honesty. It's a plea to correct the official record of one of the absolute darkest chapters of the 20th century.
Okay, so let's be really clear about the two main people here. On one side, you have the author, journalist, Ally Yusuf Mugenzi, and on the other, the recipient, Louise Arbour. She's the former chief prosecutor for the Rwandan tribunal, and she's the one whose past decisions are pretty much being put on trial in this letter.
I mean, the accusation here is just staggering. The letter claims Arbour's actions didn't just fall short of delivering justice, it's saying she actively buried the truth of what started the genocide, which in turn made real reconciliation between Hutus and Tutsis basically impossible.
To really get the weight of all this, we have to go back. Back to one single event. The one that the author claims is the key to this whole tragedy. The moment that lit the fuse.
It all kicks off on April 6, 1994. A plane gets shot down over the capital, Kigali. The very next day, 100 days of horrific slaughter begin. A few months later, the UN steps in and creates the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, also known as the ICTR. Now, you really need to pay attention to this part. The tribunal's official mandate, its job description, gave it the power to investigate crimes that happened during the entire calendar year of 1994, from January 1st all the way to December 31st. That date range, it's about to become the most important detail in this entire story. And this brings us right to the heart of the accusation in this letter. The claim that a critical investigation into that plane crash was intentionally shut down. So, for a long time, the common story was that Hutu extremists shot down the president's plane to create an excuse for the genocide. But this letter claims that the ICTR's own internal investigators found compelling evidence that pointed in a completely different direction.
The investigation apparently hit a major turning point in February of 1997. Why? Because of three whistleblowers. The letter says these three insiders came forward from deep within the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF. That's the Tutsi-led rebel force. And boy, did they have a story to tell. A story that could have changed everything.
And listen, this wasn't just some vague rumor. The letter claims these witnesses gave incredibly specific accounts. They alleged that the RPF leader, Paul Kagame himself, had put together a secret team with one goal: to assassinate the president by shooting down his plane. They even supposedly named names.
So what happened when this bombshell information was brought to the prosecutor, Louise Arbour? Well, the letter alleges she took three very specific actions. She broke up the investigation team, she took their internal memo that detailed all their findings and concealed it, and then she ordered a full and complete stop to any investigation into the plane crash.
This whole thing apparently led to a direct, face-to-face confrontation. And the account of this meeting comes to us from a sworn affidavit by the lead investigator on the case, a man named Michael Hourigan.
So the whole argument boiled down to this one fundamental disagreement. Hourigan states in his affidavit that Arbour suddenly claimed the plane crash was outside their jurisdiction. But Hourigan's response was simple. Look at the mandate. It covers all of 1994. April 6th is definitely in 1994.
You can just feel the shock in Hourigan's sworn statement. He says he was, in his own words, astounded. He claims he even reminded her that they had talked about this investigation before, and she had never, not once, raised a problem with it.
According to Hourigan's account, the meeting got heated, fast. Arbour allegedly became hostile, basically turning his legal point into a question of whether he was defying her orders. Hourigan's reply here is so telling. He draws this incredibly sharp line between her authority, which he has to respect, and her judgment, which he clearly disagreed with. It just highlights the massive professional dilemma he was in. And then, according to Hourigan, came the final move. He says Arbour asked him if the memo he brought her was the only copy. When he said yes, she allegedly took it from him, locked it in her filing cabinet, and that was it. The investigation was dead. The evidence wasn't just ignored,
It was, he claims, physically suppressed. Unsurprisingly, Hourigan resigned right after that.
And you know what? Hourigan wasn't just some lone wolf. His direct boss, James Lyons, the commander of investigations, completely backed him up. He called the attack the spark that ignited the genocide and said there was more than ample justification to investigate it as an act of terrorism, which was totally within the tribunal's mandate.
So the author of this letter argues that this alleged decision to kill the investigation wasn't just some small detail. He claims its consequences have echoed through the region for decades, damaging justice, history, and stability.
The letter really paints a picture of this cascading damage. It argues that bearing this one story fractured the historical record, it compromised any real chance at reconciliation, it delayed justice for the very attack that started it all, and in the end, it really tarnished the reputation of the United Nations itself.
And get this, the letter even brings up a private conversation from 2012 with Burundi's late president. Remember, his predecessor was on that plane and died in the crash. In that meeting, he allegedly pointed the finger directly at Arbour, even suggesting she was pressured by powerful countries at the UN to protect the people who were really responsible.
And that brings us to the author's final, passionate appeal. His point is that you can't build a peaceful future on a foundation of half-truths. He's saying that without a full, honest look at every part of the past, including who shot down that plane, real healing in the region is simply impossible.
And that, right there, is the powerful, haunting question that this letter leaves us all with. It really forces you to think about the massive weight of a single story, the incredible consequences of a suppressed investigation, and what happens when the very first chapter of a tragedy remains unwritten. For now, it's a question of justice and history that is still waiting for an answer.